welcome back to the video summary of the 3 Levels of Leadership, a series of talks I did at Geekdom in San Antonio. This will be the second level of leadership, the personal, your ability to connect and empathize and to be able to inspire people through ways that are relatable to them, not necessarily to you, but a way that's still authentic. I think we can all agree that if you have a vision and you can't inspire people through means that are skillful for them, that relates into their world, so you can step into their shoes and actually have them feel like they're the most important person in the room, and have them feel, regardless of how much you have in common, feel like they're related to you, that they know, like, and trust you almost immediately. And that's what this will be about, rapport and empathy. So let's get to it. Welcome to part 2, personal leadership. In this segment, we'll cover rapport, we'll touch on presence, and we'll talk about values and vision. Not only values as conflict resolution, but also values in that you need to step into someone else's shoes. You need to understand what's important to them to be able to motivate them towards some vision. And if you're really good, you can speak to the underlying emotions that they're experiencing, both positive and negative, as a way to not only have somebody feel deeply met and understood, but also to resolve conflict. So what do you do when there's no me too? I mean, most people, what they do is they try to establish rapport by asking people, do you have children? No, I don't have children. Oh, okay. Well, where'd you go to school? Well, I didn't actually. I started my first company when I was 17 years old. Oh, okay. And so they just keep striking out. Have you ever been to the East Coast? Nope. I was born and raised on the West Coast. Okay. And you just keep not having anything in common. But having things in common doesn't necessarily mean you like each other or trust each other. So first, let's just distinguish what rapport actually means. It's a sense of harmony, recognition, and mutual acceptance that exists between people when you're at ease with one another, and where communication just sort of flows. It occurs easily. When we're in rapport with someone, the similarities between us are emphasized and the differences are minimized. You simply care less about the differences, and you understand the similarities, but most of this actually happens at an unconscious level, and most of it happens non-verbally. So before we get into ethics, which I'll cover, let's just emphasize the fact that this happens naturally. If you've ever been to some place where there's an accent that's different than yours, I was born and raised in San Francisco, and we like to think in California that we don't have an accent, but if you ask somebody from the South, they certainly think we have an accent, and they think our accent is very funny as well. But how long did it take you to pick up a slight accent, just a touch of it, once you visited that place? In my experience, it takes no more than 3 days, especially if you're related to the people. If there's some sort of blood relative or maybe an old friend, you might pick up that accent within hours. You can actually tell old couples, they look like each other, largely because they've made the same facial expressions at each other over and over the years. It gets kind of spooky, actually. Maybe you've experienced finishing a friend's sentences because you understand them so well. And for some of you who are more in tune, you know what someone's feeling from across the room, and it can be accurate. And that's largely because you've actually stepped into their shoes in a way that we'll talk very specifically about. And the other one that I think is very interesting is, have you ever been in traffic on the highway, and when you speed up, the car next to you speeds up, and when you slow down, the car next to you slows down, and you think it's kind of annoying? It's actually because you're usually seated in the same position. The cars are usually at the same level. And so, as you'll see in a few minutes, it's because you're already naturally in rapport, and it's an unconscious connection. You're aware of it, they're not. So what is rapport in terms of the mechanics of it? Rapport is matching, and then pacing, which is matching through time. And then once you've done that enough, then you can lead. In other words, once you've stepped into someone's world for long enough, you can then expand it. Or another way is match, pace, and then lead. And that's usually the way it is most effective. But matching what? What is it that we're matching? What is it that we're stepping into? So here are some things that you can match and mirror. There's the verbal predicates, which means, as examples, I see your point. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Yeah, I can really feel that. Those are indications of their primary rep systems. And in the Hacking Your Own Mind section, we'll talk about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic and why that's important. But it's an indicator of how they're coding their world internally in their subjective experience. What that does is allows you to be able to match those things. If they say, do you see my point? And you say, yeah, I'm hearing you. And they go, no, I don't think you're seeing my point. It's because they don't actually feel matched. So you want to understand those keywords, phrases, and we'll get into values in a little bit. But these are things that you can match verbally. And then there's the nonverbal, which is actually probably more important. It's certainly more powerful, and it happens more rapidly. But it requires more awareness, and it requires full system awareness. You need to be aware of voice tone, volume, inflection, body posture, large body movements, facial expressions, how they're folding or placing their hands, or whether they're crossing their legs or not, or tapping their foot, things like that. And those are things that you can mirror to not only get a better understanding of them, but to have them feel understood, to have them feel, well, frankly, matched. You can also obviously match things like accents and things of that nature. Now, some people worry about mocking somebody. The truth is, people only ever notice this if you point it out. Usually there's somebody when I do this live, there's usually somebody in the audience, and I've been matching them for a few minutes, and then I draw their attention to it after I show this slide. And it really is a matter of stepping into their world. So there's an exercise that I'll encourage you to do, and that is to find a partner. And I don't know where you'll find that partner. Somebody who, you think it would be fun to play some sort of communication game with, so that you can both get better at nonverbal communication. And you're going to do this. First, you're going to pick who's person A and who's person B. And person A will start talking in a very opinionated way about something where there's usually disagreement. And say something that you don't even have to believe it. Say something that you think, in fact, the person would disagree with, or agree with, rather. And one of you stands up and one of you stays seated. And the person standing up, you can talk just at length about whatever it is that you find the person might agree with. And then person B agree with everything they say verbally, while grossly mismatching them physically. You can stand up, you can wave your arms, you can be radically different in volume while you're agreeing with them. So you're agreeing verbally, but you're disagreeing non-verbally. You're mismatching with your body while you match with your words. And then notice your experience. Most people report that that even though the person agreed with what they were saying, they just didn't like them for some reason, or they wanted to change their mind, or they wanted to change their opinion. And so here's the second exercise. You want to start talking in the same opinionated way, and go ahead and switch roles on this, and the second person disagree with everything they say verbally, saying things like, yeah, I completely disagree, I think you're wrong, while impeccably matching them non-verbally, body language, volume, tone. So if they say the thing they say in a soft voice, you say it in a soft voice. If they have a certain inflection, you borrow that inflection, you match that inflection. And you'll notice that even, and you sit in the same way. If you have chairs, both of you sit, both of you cross your legs while you're disagreeing verbally. And you'll begin to notice that while you disagree with them, you like them. Or you at least feel like, you'd like to spend more time with them. The other exercise I'll suggest you take on, and by the way, you can do this at line with somebody who you know or don't know. Maybe you're waiting in line at Starbucks or the grocery store. And just start to match their body movements. If they shift their shoulders, you shift their shoulders. You can watch the tops of their shoulders and breathe with them in the same rate. They'll likely turn around because they feel your presence in a deeper way. But also, you can just follow them around and see what it feels like to walk the way they walk. Now, don't do anything that might get you in trouble or offend anybody. But you'll begin to notice certain experiences, and you can do this rapidly. You can do it for 2 or 3 minutes. or even 30 seconds. And you'll notice that there's a different kind of connection that occurs. Matching on the phone, obviously you want to, and you can use this in sales, or you can use this for humor. You can use it any way you like, but you can match on the phone with voice tone, with inflection, with volume, certainly, even for something that doesn't make any sense to you at the time. One of my mentors years ago, she did some consulting inside of the Diners Club credit card company, and or was it Discover? I don't remember. Anyway, at the time, the customer service department was bleeding money, and they saw it as an absolute cost to their business, but they couldn't do without it. Obviously, you have to have one of those. And she went and did some consulting with them and taught them a few simple matching and mirroring exercises, match, pace, and lead, right? So if a client called up and they were, I can't believe this, the customer service person saying, I can't believe it either. It's terrible. Now, what can we do for you? And they ended up turning the customer service department, which was at the time a revenue drain, into a revenue source, because they were able to not only solve the person's problem, but build enough rapport with them so they could actually sell them additional services. That's the power of rapport, especially with strangers. We talked a bit about this already, and let's get into values. But here's a different way of thinking about rapport. They feel they're respected. They're experienced that we're recognizing their communication, and we're appropriately responding in all these channels, and most of this is unconscious. They experience the relationship as non-threatening, even if you're disagreeing with them. And the experience of communicating with us, they find it effortless and more seamless. Like, they just feel comfortable around us, and it really means that we're acting responsibly. And here's something that you can simply live by as a principle. A lot of people say, oh, that person just didn't get me. They just didn't get my point, or they just weren't hearing what I said. Frankly, that's a fairly lazy way of going about it. And it also puts all the power outside of you. It puts all the power with them, rather than having you as the locus of power and responsibility. So there's a principle that I live by, and that's that there's no such thing as a resistant client or a resistant prospect or somebody who just didn't get me. There's only unresourceful, inflexible, or uncreative leaders, meaning I simply haven't found a way to communicate to them effectively or not. So just imagine the difference between what happens when you think, wow, they're just not hearing me. And it puts all the power there. But if you say, well, I just haven't found a way yet to effectively communicate to them such that they can hear me, well, that gives you flexibility. It demands creativity. It also adds in an element of time so that you are more likely to find a way to be effective with them. And here's the bottom line. Whenever a client resists, quote unquote, it's a statement about what you're doing, not about what they're doing. And if you live by that, then you'll be far more effective with everybody you encounter. Now, it requires taking 100% responsibility for every interaction you have. And that's fine. Responsibility is your access to power. And the more you do that, the more you'll build self-esteem as well, which helps with your internal alignment, as you'll see in segment 3 of this 3 Levels of Leadership series. Now, let's talk about ethics, and this is, I think, a concern everybody should have, because there's a bright line for me between servicing connection and manipulation, and it is this: whose outcomes are you in service of? Because if you're in service of their outcomes, or a co-created, a co-aligned, or a win-win solution, then you can use these tools because they're very powerful tools of influence. But if you're just trying to get something from them, or take something from them, or trick them into something, or get an outcome that they may or may not, if you use this basically to overcome objections in an unethical way, then you're misusing this technology. You are misusing these tools, and you are frankly acting in an unethical way. And so far, we've covered the public level of leadership, presentation, and platform skills. We've talked about the personal, which is rapport, empathy, and values. And next we'll get into the private, how to hack your own mind, which will deal with the difference between presence and charisma, and also how to navigate your own interiors, how to navigate the structure of your own internal experience. We'll talk about self-esteem. We'll talk about how to create internal alignment, and this will probably be the most fun. Hope you'll join us.